Story 1. Monster Baby. A True Horror Story. Introduction. The village of Greystone, tucked away in a forgotten corner of the English countryside, was a place of whispered tales and silent fears. Its history was etched into the cobblestone streets and weathered homes, but nothing was spoken of louder than the legend of the witch's curse. 2 centuries ago, a young woman named Maribelle Holloway had been accused of witchcraft. As the villagers burned her at the stake, her cries pierced the night. "You think you rid yourselves of evil, but the true monster lies in your bloodlines. Mark my words, one day you will birth a child not of this world. It will be your undoing." Generations passed, and Maribelle's curse became folklore. But when Eliza and Henry Welton welcomed their firstborn into the world, the dark whispers began anew. Chapter 1. A Perfect Beginning. Eliza cradled the newborn in her arms, tears streaming down her face. Caleb had arrived after years of heartbreak, miscarriages, sleepless nights, and prayers unanswered. Now, as she looked into his serene blue eyes, she believed her prayers had finally been heard. "He's perfect," she whispered to Henry, who smiled down at them both, his hand trembling as he touched the baby's tiny fingers. The midwife cooed over Caleb, marveling at his quiet demeanor. He didn't cry like other babies. He simply gazed at the world with an unnatural calm. The villagers were quick to celebrate the miracle baby, gathering at the Welton home with gifts and blessings. But amidst the joy there were murmurs. "He's so quiet," someone said. "Almost too quiet." Another whispered, "Did you see his eyes? Strange, aren't they?" Eliza dismissed their comments. Caleb was healthy and beautiful. What more could she want? Chapter 2. Signs of the Strange. By the time Caleb was 3 months old, peculiarities began to surface. Eliza first noticed it when the family cat, Whiskers, went missing. They found the cat days later, its body twisted unnaturally in the woods behind their home. Henry blamed a fox, but Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that Caleb's laughter had echoed through the house the moment the cat had disappeared. Then there was the incident with the mobile above Caleb's crib. One night, Eliza awoke to the sound of something heavy crashing to the floor. Rushing into the nursery, she found the mobile in pieces, the metal hooks bent as if wrenched apart by unseen hands. Caleb lay in his crib, wide awake, his gaze fixed on her. "It's just a baby," Henry said when she told him. "Babies don't do things like that." But Eliza began to wonder if Caleb was truly just a baby. Chapter 3. The First Encounter. When Caleb turned 6 months old, Eliza decided to visit Agnes, the town recluse. Agnes lived on the outskirts of Greystone in a crumbling stone cottage, surrounded by wild herbs and symbols carved into the wooden door. "I need answers," Eliza said, clutching Caleb tightly as Agnes ushered her inside. Strange things are happening. Agnes studied the baby, her wrinkled face growing pale. "You should have come sooner," she muttered. She explained the curse of Maribelle Holloway, the prophecy of a monstrous child destined to wreak havoc on the town. "But he's innocent," Eliza protested. "For now," Agnes replied. "But the signs are clear. His powers will grow, and when he does, you must be ready to make a choice." Agnes handed her a silver dagger, its hilt engraved with ancient runes. "This is your only hope, if the time comes." Chapter 4. Darkness Unveiled. As Caleb grew, so did his strange abilities. By his first birthday, objects would move around him without explanation. Once, Eliza found him standing in his crib, despite being too young to walk, his glowing blue eyes fixated on a shadow that seemed to shift and writhe across the wall. At the birthday party, chaos erupted. The candles on the cake flared unnaturally high, and the room plunged into darkness. Guests screamed as Caleb transformed before their eyes. His body grew unnaturally, his pale skin stretching over elongated limbs. his face contorted, his teeth sharp and monstrous. Henry grabbed Eliza, pulling her away from the child they once called their son. But Caleb's voice stopped them cold. "You cannot run," he hissed, his voice deep and guttural. "I am what you made me." Chapter 5. A Mother's Sacrifice. Desperate and terrified, Eliza remembered the dagger Agnes had given her. With trembling hands, she retrieved it from its hiding place. Tears blurred her vision as she approached Caleb, who now loomed over them, a monstrous figure bathed in shadow. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, plunging the blade into his chest. Caleb let out a scream that shook the walls, his body collapsing into ash. The room fell silent, the darkness lifting as quickly as it had come. Epilogue. The village mourned Caleb, but they also feared him. The Weltons left Greystone soon after, unable to bear the memories of what they had lost. But Eliza would always carry the weight of her choice, haunted by the question of whether Caleb could have been saved. Moral. The tale of Caleb serves as a reminder of the dangers of curses and the enduring power of love. It teaches us that sometimes the most difficult choices are the ones that define us, and that the past, no matter how deeply buried, can always find its way back. Story 2. Mysterious Trumps Home. A True Horror Story. Introduction. The whispers about Trump's home had circulated for decades, passed down as ghost stories from one generation to the next in the small town of Blackwood. No one truly knew the origins of the mansion, but its name struck fear into the hearts of those who lived nearby. Built over a century ago by a reclusive millionaire named Jonathan Trump, the house had been abandoned for over 50 years. Rumors of strange disappearances, unexplained deaths, and eerie lights from its windows kept even the bravest of locals away. For Daniel, Sarah, Miguel, and Emily, however, the mansion was the perfect destination for an adventure. As college students with a shared love for urban exploration, they'd already visited several abandoned places, from decrepit hospitals to forgotten mines. But Trump's home was different. It wasn't just abandoned, it was feared. "I'm telling you, this is going to be our greatest find yet," Daniel said, grinning as he laid out a map on their dorm room table. "You've said that about every creepy place we've gone to," Emily replied, her dark curls framing her skeptical face. "But a haunted mansion? Isn't that a bit cliché?" Sarah leaned forward, her blue eyes gleaming with excitement. "Maybe, but think of the history. This guy, Trump, supposedly went mad trying to live forever. What if there's something real to the legend? We could make a documentary or write an article. People eat that stuff up." Miguel, the practical one of the group, frowned. "I don't know. The locals won't even go near it. What if we're biting off more than we can chew?" "Since when are you scared, Miguel?" Daniel teased, clapping him on the back. "We'll stick together. Worst case, it's just another creepy old house, and we get some cool pictures." The plan was set. They'd drive to Blackwood, hike to the mansion, and spend the night documenting their experience. What they didn't realize was that the house had been waiting for them. Arrival at Trump's home. The drive to Blackwood was uneventful, the excitement of the group masking any lingering doubts. As they turned onto the dirt road leading to the mansion, the forest seemed to close in around them. The trees were gnarled and twisted, their branches intertwining like skeletal hands. "There it is," Sarah whispered, pointing as the mansion came into view. Trump's home was massive, its Gothic architecture casting long shadows across the overgrown lawn. Tall spires reached toward the sky, and broken windows reflected the fading sunlight like empty eyes. A wrought iron gate hung ajar, creaking softly in the wind. "This place looks like it stepped out of a nightmare," Miguel muttered, clutching his camera tightly. As they approached, Emily noticed strange carvings on the stone pillars flanking the gate. Symbols she didn't recognize, but that made her stomach churn. "Does anyone else feel weird about this?" she asked. It's just your imagination, Daniel said, pushing the gate open. Come on. We didn't drive all this way to chicken out. The group stepped onto the property, the air growing colder with each step. The front door was massive, its wood splintered with age, but it opened easily under Daniel's touch. The smell of mildew and decay hit them immediately, making Miguel gag. Inside, the mansion was as grand as it was eerie. A massive chandelier hung precariously from the ceiling, its crystals covered in cobwebs. Faded wallpaper peeled from the walls, revealing strange, hand-drawn patterns beneath. Let's split up and explore, Sarah suggested. We'll cover more ground that way. Split up? Are you serious? Miguel asked, his voice rising. Relax, she said. We'll stay in pairs. Me and Daniel will check upstairs. You and Emily can take the ground floor. Reluctantly, Miguel agreed, and the group divided, unaware that the house was already watching them. Exploration and unease. As Daniel and Sarah ascended the creaking staircase, the air grew heavier. They passed portraits of Jonathan Trump, his gaunt face and piercing eyes seeming to follow their every move. This guy gives me the creeps, Sarah muttered. Look at this, Daniel said, pointing to a painting that was slightly askew. Behind it was a small alcove containing a dusty book. Daniel pulled it out, coughing as he blew the dust off its cover. The title read, Rituals of the Eternal. Meanwhile, Miguel and Emily were exploring the library on the ground floor. The shelves were lined with books, many of them written in languages they couldn't understand. As Emily ran her fingers along the spines, she felt a strange pulse, like a heartbeat, coming from one of the books. She pulled it free and opened it, revealing pages filled with strange symbols and diagrams. What is that? Miguel asked, leaning over her shoulder. I don't know, but it feels alive, she said, her voice trembling. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the house. The four of them reconvened in the foyer, their faces pale. Did you guys hear that? Sarah asked. Yeah, Miguel said, gripping his flashlight tightly. It came from the basement. No way, Emily said, backing away. We are not going down there. Come on, Daniel said, his bravado wavering. We need to know what's going on. The descent into the basement. Reluctantly, the group made their way toward the basement door, each step punctuated by the creaks of the old wooden floor. The door was slightly ajar, revealing a narrow staircase that plunged into darkness. A faint, metallic smell wafted up from below, making Emily gag. This is insane, she whispered. Why are we even doing this? Because we have to know, Daniel replied, his voice unsteady. If we leave now, we'll just spend the rest of our lives wondering. Sarah led the way, her flashlight slicing through the darkness. Miguel followed close behind, gripping the camera he had insisted on bringing, though his hands were trembling. The basement was colder than the rest of the house, the air damp and heavy. As they descended, the whispers began. At first, they were faint, indistinct murmurs that seemed to come from the walls themselves. But as they reached the bottom of the stairs, the whispers grew louder, forming words that none of them could understand, but all felt compelled to listen to. The basement was vast, far larger than they had expected. The walls were lined with shelves, holding jars filled with unidentifiable substances. In the center of the room was a large stone altar, its surface stained dark with what looked alarmingly like blood. What the hell is this? Miguel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Daniel stepped forward, his flashlight illuminating carvings on the walls. They were the same symbols Emily had seen on the pillars outside. It's some kind of ritual site, he said, running his fingers over the carvings. Suddenly, Sarah screamed. The others whirled around to see her standing rigid, her flashlight pointed at something in the corner of the room. There, half hidden in shadow, was a figure. At first they thought it was a mannequin, a tall, gaunt figure draped in tattered robes. But as Daniel moved closer, the figure's head turned slowly to face him. Its eyes were black voids, and its mouth twisted into an unnatural grin. "Run!" Daniel shouted, grabbing Sarah's arm and pulling her toward the stairs. The group scrambled up the steps, the whispers rising to a deafening crescendo. As they reached the top, the basement door slammed shut behind them, the sound reverberating through the house. The house awakens. Back in the foyer, the group huddled together, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. The mansion seemed to pulse around them, the walls vibrating as if alive. "We need to get out of here," Emily said, her voice shaking. Daniel tried the front door, but it wouldn't budge. "It's locked," he said, slamming his shoulder against it to no avail. "Try the windows!" Miguel shouted. They ran to the nearest window, but it was sealed as if fused with the wall. Every attempt to break it failed, the glass unyielding. "We're trapped," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. The whispers returned, this time louder and more insistent. The shadows in the room seemed to stretch and move, forming shapes that danced along the walls. "What does it want?" Emily asked, clutching the journal she had taken from the library. "It's not the house," Daniel said, his eyes darting to the carvings on the walls. "It's him, Trump. He's still here in some form." Miguel grabbed the journal and flipped through its pages, scanning the cryptic entries. "There's a ritual in here," he said. "Something about severing the connection between the soul and the house, but it's complicated." "What do we have to do?" Sarah asked. Miguel hesitated, his face pale. "It requires a life, a sacrifice. The struggle for survival." The revelation sent the group into chaos. "No way," Emily said, backing away. "There has to be another way." "We don't have time to argue," Daniel said. "The house is closing in on us. If we don't do this, none of us are getting out alive." As they debated, the shadows grew more aggressive, darting toward them and forcing them to retreat into the dining room. The chandelier above them swayed violently, its crystals falling and shattering on the table below. Miguel gripped the journal tightly, his hands shaking. "There's a passage here about binding the soul temporarily. It might give us enough time to figure out another way." "What do we need for that?" Sarah asked. Miguel pointed to the basement. The altar, returning to the basement. With no other options, the group made their way back to the basement. The air was colder than before, and the whispers were now a constant roar. As they reached the altar, the figure they had seen earlier reappeared, standing motionless at the far end of the room. Its void-like eyes seemed to pierce through them, and its grin widened unnaturally. "Hurry!" Sarah urged. Miguel read from the journal, the words foreign and guttural. As he spoke, the carvings on the walls began to glow, pulsing with an eerie red light. The figure let out a low, guttural growl and began to move toward them, its movements jerky and unnatural. "It's not working!" Emily shouted, her eyes wide with terror. "It needs blood!" Miguel said, his voice breaking. "Just a few drops!" Daniel grabbed a shard of broken glass from the floor and cut his palm, letting the blood drip onto the altar. The glowing intensified, and the figure let out an ear-piercing shriek before vanishing into the shadows. The house fell silent. The final decision. As they stood in the basement, the journal trembled in Miguel's hands. The glowing carvings began to fade, and the air grew heavier. "It's not over," Miguel said. "The binding won't last long. We still need to sever the connection." The group fell silent, the weight of what needed to be done sinking in. "I'll do it," Miguel said finally. "No," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "We'll find another way." "There is no other way," Miguel said, his voice firm. "If one of us doesn't stay, none of us will leave." Before anyone could stop him, Miguel placed his hand on the altar and began reciting the final incantation. The carvings flared to life, and the room shook violently. "Go!" he shouted. "Get out of here!" The remaining three ran up the stairs, the house collapsing around them. They reached the front door, which now swung open easily, and stumbled into the night. Conclusion. When they looked back, the mansion was gone, replaced by a smoldering crater. The journal lay on the ground at their feet, its pages blank except for a single sentence. "I am free." Days later, as they sat in their dorm room trying to process what had happened, Emily found a new entry in the journal. It read, "He's waiting." Moral. The story ends with a chilling reminder. Curiosity about the unknown comes at a price, and some mysteries are better left unsolved. Story 3. Monster of the Basement. A True Horror Story. Introduction. It had been years since Lily had stepped foot inside the house. The memories of her childhood were still vivid in her mind, but there was one memory that stood out above all others: her father's warning about the basement. "Never go down there," he had said. "The basement isn't what it seems. You don't understand, Lily." She was only 10 when her father first said those words, and she had never questioned them. The house had always felt strange, eerie even, with its creaky floors, dim lighting, and cold drafts. But the basement, that was something else. It was as though it harbored a secret, something dark and ancient. And Lily, with the rebellious spirit of a child, had always wondered what lay beneath the floorboards. Now, at 25, Lily had returned to the old family home. After years of her father's mysterious absence and her mother's passing, the house had been left to her. It felt wrong to sell it, as if doing so would mean severing the last tie she had to her parents, even though they'd been gone for so long. So, here she was, standing at the front door, a grown woman with no more childhood fears, except for one: the basement. Lily took a deep breath, pushing away the unsettling feeling in her chest. "It's just a house," she told herself, stepping over the threshold. "The basement is just a basement." But as she made her way through the hallway, her gaze instinctively darted to the closed door at the end of the corridor, the door that led to the basement. A chill ran down her spine, and she turned away, forcing herself to focus on the task at hand, cleaning and sorting the house. She had no intention of confronting her father's old warning. Not yet, anyway. But as night began to fall, the house grew colder. And with the chill, an oppressive sense of dread filled the air, something that Lily hadn't felt in years. But now, it was unmistakable. The basement door was slightly ajar. Lily froze in her tracks, staring at the dark crack in the doorframe. Her heart raced, and an odd sensation crept up her spine. It was as if something was calling her, pulling her toward the dark, hidden depths of the house. She had to know. Against every warning, against the long years of fear that had kept her away, she stepped forward. As she approached the basement door, she could feel a thick, suffocating air that seemed to seep from within. The house was old, and every creak in the wood made it feel alive, like it was watching her. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, urging her not to go down. But curiosity won, and with a trembling hand, she pushed the door open fully. The stairs that led to the basement were steep and dark. The dim light from upstairs barely illuminated the first few steps. She reached for the light switch, but her hand hesitated. A sudden gust of cold air swept past her, and the light flickered before going out completely. Lily stood still, heart thumping in her chest. The basement was engulfed in complete darkness. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, to leave, but there was something in the air, something ancient, that urged her forward. "Just a quick look," she whispered to herself. "I'll just look." Slowly, she descended the stairs, each step creaking under her weight. The air grew colder, and the smell of mildew and dust filled her nostrils. There was an odd stench, a metallic scent that made her stomach churn. Lily reached the bottom, and for a moment her eyes adjusted to the dim surroundings. What she saw made her blood run cold. The basement wasn't what she remembered. It was more than just a storage area. It was a shrine, There were symbols carved into the walls, runes she didn't recognize, and strange, unearthly markings scattered across the floor. Her eyes traced the outlines of a figure, a monstrous shape, standing in the farthest corner of the room. It was tall, twisted, and dark, its eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. Lily's breath caught in her throat, and her legs felt like lead. This wasn't just some abandoned part of the house. This thing. It had been waiting for her. The figure moved, and Lily froze. Moral of the story. The story of the monster of the basement is a chilling reminder that some things are best left alone, buried in the darkness where they belong. Curiosity may push us to seek answers, but some answers are better left unknown. Fear isn't always a barrier, but a warning, one that should be heeded before the consequences of our actions become irreversible.